Why is he in the bottom third?
It's an aesthetic change.
Yeah.
As the movie well,
As the story progresses.
yeah. Thank you. Can we take early bets as to where playing a role is going to end up in the movie?
And becoming.
Yeah, I'm so curious. I mean,
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Hey, here we go.
Moral relationship. That's what
I don't realize.
Good evening. Tonight we watched the Academy Award-winning Ida. Just won the award. So I'm glad we picked this foreign film to do. Let's start with identifying the 4 through lines. Overall story. What's going on?
I think it's settling up old secrets left over from the war or something. I don't know how to word it.
Quite literally digging up the past.
All right. I like that. Digging up
Well, now I feel free.
the past.
Well, it's the same thing usually.
Main character? Hamlet? No, I'm sorry. This is called what?
Ida?
Ida. Okay. And influence character.
Or as I like to say, it's the one who was always doing
Gouda?
clothes
No.
on her head.
Gouda. Wanda, right?
Wanda
Yeah.
is
Her sister.
her aunt.
Yeah, aunt.
Sorry. And relationship is
Family.
Yeah. The only family that they kind of each have.
so sort of remaining family. Okay. Main character resolve, change or steadfast, and why?
I think she's steadfast.
I say steadfast.
And I think it's because the movie starts with she is headed towards her vows, and she goes out into the world to see if that's a good idea, and she returns at the end. And
Not of her own choice.
not of her own choice, but
It's
still.
important that she wants to stay, and they tell her, no, you have to go, and you have to go see your aunt.
Right. So she has the
Who doesn't want to see her?
world's most depressing Rumspringa, and then she comes back and she takes her vows. So,
I'm assuming that's sort of sowing your oats. Is that what that means? Rumspringa?
it's what I think it's what the Quakers do. You have like a year where you're supposed to go out into the
Right.
world.
That's, I was going to say this is very similar to
Yeah.
What's her name in Witness.
Yeah.
Oh.
Kind of-
Well, before you put that down,
Yes.
can I make an argument for change?
Yes, you may.
For the very same thing that you just said, at the very beginning, she's told what she's supposed to do. She does it, and she basically bees what she's supposed to be, and at the end, she makes the choice to come back. She has an option. If she was steadfast, she would have stayed with that guy and been the wife and had the kids and had the usual life. But instead of doing that, she chooses to come back to the convent.
But she did not wish to leave. She wanted to stay.
Right.
And at the end, she wants to stay. At the beginning, she wants to join the church.
Right.
At the end, she wants to join the church.
Right.
But I think Jim
But
is
she's
saying
doing it under her own. She knows who she is now, and she's doing it under her own volition. Like she wants to do it.
Right, but isn't that kind of what growth is all about?
Sure, but I still think
she wanted to stay. Remember, she grew up there. As far as she knew, there really wasn't an alternative.
right,
and what
right,
the- and
exactly.
what- right,
Yeah, there was an
so-
alternative, and now she's being given an alternative.
In
She
which
has an
through
option.
line?
In her main character through line, she has an option.
No, the overall story is what forces her out. The nuns who are in the overall story, they force her out. They
I would consider that part of the main character, and I would say the situation, the overall story situation through line is like post-war Poland and dealing with all that stuff that everybody's dealing with.
Okay. I don't know, because when Well, first of all, she's not very talkative through the first half of the movie, so it's kind of hard to say, except by her complaining that she's being forced to have to go out into the world and visit an aunt who doesn't like her, and in fact rejected her in terms of adopting her.
Right.
So she does not really want to go out there, and she wants to stay in the church. And at the end,
But
pretty much
halfway through, she decides not to take the vows. She's sitting in the back of the church, so I'm not ready for it.
but that's halfway through.
She's like,
See,
"Oh, fine."
that's the thing, is that when you have either a change or steadfast character, they're going to have bits of both. They waffle. A steadfast character will flirt with change, ultimately choosing steadfast, and a change character will look very similar to flirting with steadfastness and ultimately change. So the fact that they have, if you'd ended the movie when,
no, I understand that. But I still interpret her going back as a doing thing as opposed to a being thing.
Well, that may or may not be the case. I'm not sure if she's a doer or a beer.
Showing a
but
change
that's
of resolve instead of doing, being kind of going with the flow and being where she was and what situations are brought to her. Like, she had no choice to be in the convent. She had no choice to be raised there, and so she was just being what she thought she was supposed to be. And at the end, she has a choice. You can keep being what is offered to you, or you can choose on your own what you want. And so she chooses to go back.
Okay, but you sound like you're making a doer-beer action decision choice and identifying that as the main character resolve. It doesn't sound like the things that you're illustrating have to do with main character resolve. And we can leave it alone. We can leave it unchosen. I'm quite okay with that. But the argument that you're making to me sounds a little. You're using doer beer and action decision, and the fact if you have a doer and an action story versus or beer and an action story, and whether they're willing or unwilling, that was kind of what you were describing to me, and I don't think that's necessarily going to indicate change or steadfast, because you could have any combination of them. If it was connected that way, then that'd be one thing, but you can really have any combination of those. So I don't think there is no causality in the way I think you're describing. They may coexist, so I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying I don't think that the argument that you're making is not drawing on the right pieces to make the argument as far as the character resolve. But that's fine. And frankly, I think if you stop the movie when she goes back the first time, it would have looked like she was, a very, very clearly a steadfast character without really any consideration for the alternative except a little tiny, tiny flirtation. The fact that you suddenly have this sort of second, not half, almost like a third,
or less,
is a little odd on the balance of things, but if you look at them as an entirety, I think that maybe what you're saying is bringing it into question. So let's leave it alone, since we've got clear argument on the other side.
I feel like that the author's intent was that she be steadfast and that she flirted with this other paradigm. She clearly became her impact character for a while just to try it out, to make sure, basically to do that so she'll know whether or not she does want to go back. But I believe since this movie is so visual and so it's so minimalistic in its dialogue and so predominantly visual in its storytelling. I feel like visually her putting back on, I don't know if you call it a habit or whatever the thing, her
novitiate,
her veil.
Yeah.
To me, I think demonstrates the author's intent that she tried out this paradigm for a while, but she preferred to go back to her original paradigm, which would make
Right, but let's leave it. Let's.
So then the argument for Wanda changing, he says that she kills herself.
It's more difficult.
No, I don't think that's very difficult.
well,
I think that's actually pretty easy. You have someone who absolutely, completely refuses to consider the past at all. Zero. They're not important. They're not relevant. And then right before she's killing herself, she's got all her family pictures out. Not only has she gone from I don't want to even know anything about this, I don't know where they are, to going out and then digging up the family grave and sticking all all of the things that from her past that she's denied, including her son, out of wedlock child, and their murder. All of that is in her face, and then you see her looking at the pictures, including the picture of her son that she left in order to go fight, or I don't know whatever she says, and basically she's I would say guilt-ridden, but she can't handle it. The thing that has been motivating her drinking, the drinking no longer hides it anymore. The pain is there, and the only way she can deal with it is just to sort of end it. But she fully embraces her past when she brings out those pictures and lays them out into essentially a family tree. It is exactly the opposite of, and you see her affection for Ida and her sister. Right at that same scene, it's actually the following scene when she's with that guy. That's pretty much she's embraced family at that point.
Which contrasts with the first line.
What was the following scene?
She has doesn't she do the pictures before she sleeps with that guy or afterward?
After.
Oh, okay, then it's right before when she talks about she has such beautiful hair. Who? Ida. And then she doesn't explain who that is. Then you see her laying out all this stuff. Basically, she's embraced family
That contrasts.
and can't handle it.
And that contrasts really sharply with the first line in the first scene where she talks to Ida, where she says, "We've had our little family reunion. I have to go get dressed."
Right. And it's with she does slept with someone in that scene, the very first scene too.
Mm-hmm.
So you have those two right against each other, and then the suicide scene. So hers to me is a really, really clear, clearly not only no longer pushing it away, but an embracing of the past that she just can't handle it.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay.
It's a tragic change, and it because it's.
But she's not the main character.
True.
That's the problem. Is she's not the main character, so we're not getting all of the story.
Yeah, and I do think there are certain beats or signposts that are missing in one or more through lines where we're not getting the complete argument.
Yeah.
I think
that's true.
I think it is very minimalistic, and so they are leaving us to sort of fill in the gaps. But when it is a tragic ending like that, sometimes it's hard to pinpoint exactly what the argument is.
If you're going to restructure it for Western thought, it would have been that about the midpoint or so, Ida would have said, "Okay, I'm going to go back and do this." Then she would have said, "Maybe not yet." Then they would have the, "Okay, let's dig up the family stuff." And then she would have joined her aunt in her aunt's antics while her aunt is really fully starting to embrace that. Her aunt then commits suicide, and Ida goes, "This is not for me. I'm going to go back where I really belong." That would have been a more traditional structure to that.
And what I thought was happening was I thought there was a handoff. I thought they were handing off the impact character or influence character through a line to the sax player, but that didn't really play out.
Yeah.
And
that was main character. That was the main character through line, and because basically his conversation with her in bed essentially was the alternative, the objective overall story alternative to her life. Mm-hmm. And it's the reason the nuns shoved her out to begin with. You have to know what you're giving up in order to give it up.
I was just going to
something
say
that was said right at the beginning.
Yeah.
But her aunt was saying, have you ever had sex? You having carnal thoughts?
Have you
No.
had sinful thoughts about carnal love?
Yeah, right. And it's like, no. Well, then how can you give up something that you've never considered?
right.
I think that's overall story.
Well, that's main character, but it's also part of the overall story. Part of the overall story has to do with the church, but really is about the family. I guess it really is about
The overall story is about the family?
Huh?
Okay. I have totally misinterpreted. I have a totally different.
Well, I mean,
I think we have
yeah. I mean, because all of the other characters are all involved with the Jewish thing.
Yeah.
The Jewish thing is all overall story. The sister thing is the relationship.
Right.
And you even have you look just like your sister, and I love my sister. It's, the more and more they're together, the more she sees her as a replacement. That Wanda sees Ida as a replacement or stand-in for her sister. That's the subjective story, and at least that's what I think it is. But it's the family thing. But the Jewishness, the murder, the death during World War II, that's what the overall story is about. Digging up the past about the murder of the Jews in the family.
All the Stalinism stuff too. I mean, the fact that do you know who I am, like Wanda? She's talking about who she is.
That's influence character. That's completely influence character because we know very little about it, and it's not provided in the story.
Sure, but that's tied into why what's his name finally gives up the what really happened back then is because she said I can destroy your life. I don't know.
Well, it seems to more the fact that he's got his neighbors, the other guys that they're gonna pressure on, but it's her going and what she can do to his father. Because she thinks he's the one who did it, the father that did it, and the kid is the one who actually did it.
I got the interpretation that the overall story was more about post-war Poland and dealing with German occupation and the Holocaust and.
Although they were not, it was
stuff.
not clear exactly why her family was murdered. They did not.
Yeah, it's really clear. They were a threat to his father's family. The ones who live there now. The guy that was in the hospital, who used to be their friend, that took over their house and cared for them while they were hiding in the forest.
Okay.
Them doing that was a threat to their father. Him taking that risk threatened him and his family, and so the son took it upon himself to get rid of that threat. And then the son is the one who then moved into that family's home.
Okay.
So that's what happened. What Wanda thought was that the father was but the father was the one that did all of this. That the father was responsible. That he basically exploited her sister and her sister's family by moving them out for their own good and then killing them. And of course her own son too.
Exploiting them as to what end?
So that they get their property. That he said that he was basically, I'll move into your property, you guys hide in the woods, and that way I can keep you safe, and meanwhile we get this nice property and this farm, etc. And maybe it started off as being a generous thing, but then became too much of a hassle, so they just killed him out of convenience. I mean, that's not explicit, but that's implied by what the son says.
Okay. So Wanda thought one thing, but the reality was another thing.
Right. The reality was it was the son, not the father, because she didn't know the son.
Yeah.
Because she's more or less, had sort of run off and left all of them alone, including her own, child, when all of this happened, and then that came back and everybody's gone and dead.
And your interpretation of why the son did it was what?
To save his own family's skin, because what they were doing was highly dangerous, and they were doing it for Jews.
I'm not sure
what
they
his
ever,
father was
I don't
doing.
I'm not sure
There's
they
a big
ever
thing
make
online
that
about how that's
explicitly
not, like,
clear.
benefit.
There's a
Yeah.
big thing online how it's like anti-Semitism and stuff. Like they didn't make it specifically clear as to why
Why
that
they were
actually
hiding?
happened. No, why he actually killed.
No, he didn't kill them because they're Jews. He killed them because if it was found out that his father was aiding Jews, they would have been killed as well.
Yeah, that's not made clear though.
No, it's not. That is not. But that is essentially those are the dynamics of the period.
It's also, I mean, when I watched it, I was wondering if it was that or if it was simply that the son was caught up in the fever of the war and to prove his good.
Like it could be.
Polish thing that he killed the Jews.
Fine.
That's what I'm wondering because
It could be either one. They never say.
But the point is that he killed them because they were Jews and took possession of their home.
Right. Those are both true.
Either reason.
But he did seem to be kind of regretful about it.
And they didn't kill her because she was too small, and
she could pass as a non-Jew, right?
Show as a Jew, so that really highlights the notion
that they were killed because they were Jewish. Well, the boy was killed because he was dark-skinned.
That they were afraid that it would be noticeable. So it's really self-preservation.
Yes.
Yeah, it was out of fear.
Yeah, it was a defensive move. It was not an offensive move.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why I think he felt terrible about it. But they were being very defensive up front because this is a dark secret. This is, as you said, digging up the past. It's not just her past. It's the past of this entire everything surrounding this event, this family. Okay, so main character approach: doer or beer?
Well,
this would be Ida.
I think she's a beer.
Okay.
I think she accepts what the nuns tell her to do. So she goes out to listen to them. I think she, I think towards the own, she's really coming into her own over the course of this, which is a very internal thing. Sort of where the end of my argument is actually.
Yeah, I think beer too, but it's hard. I'm trying to argue it without invoking that she doesn't do anything. It's like lack of doing.
No, that's no.
No, but she.
Okay, wait. The main character approach is a preference. It is not that they solve all problems a certain way.
No.
It's that when given a choice, they will prefer to choose one over the other. The story may require something completely different.
She walks away.
Story forms in mind, and in one of them she's a beer, and one of them she's a doer. I'd like her as a beer better. The argument for the story form is harder, but I would just argue that she wants to be a nun. So ultimately, she's literally anytime there's any form of anything that she could give in, instead of trying it out or getting rid of it externally, she tries to work on herself, trying to build up defenses and just strengthen her own will to just not get there, and also being a nun, trying to influence people by her demeanor and her behavior. So she feels, in that regard, that's how we argue the beer part of it. Just as a leading by example, even though I'm questioning the example, and working on myself and praying and trying to block out all that stuff that other people live, basically.
And the other problem is that she's very passive. I mean, she's a passive when she's a doer. She's passive.
Yeah.
She's a beer. She's passive.
At first, I
It's
thought
not assertive.
So, but
I didn't understand.
if she's a doer, it also helps the story from my mind. So.
Well,
I mean, at first I thought she was going to be in a situation which was she's a novitiate. But then I didn't see her doing a lot to protect that or suffering a lot of problems because of that. So it didn't seem to be a thing that caused a lot of friction in her.
I mean, is the
Well, yeah, let's not quite. It's not okay.
is the thing I'm questioning is the Wanda drinking and going out, sort of trying to forget about her problems and enjoying life as much as she can. Is the drinking a beer thing in the sense that I'm trying to alter my own perception of things in order to feel better, or is it a doer thing, as in I'm going to go out into the world?
This is not a question about her sister, and you have to be really careful that you don't try to. The main character approach does not determine the influence character approach. So you cannot use one to determine the other. It's really only about the main character. Frequently, they are going to be looked at that way, shown that way, but they don't have to, because if you think about it, doer beer is really at the domain level. You're really looking at it at the top level, whether it's the internal domain or an external domain. The emphasis, though, might be on any of the 4 levels. So you might see things much better in terms of them and the change, the effect of the change down at the character level or at the thematic level or at the plot level, in which case you can't make that argument for doer beer, because doer beer is only at the domain level. It influences everything else. It affects everything below it, but not at the, at a much more diffuse, way. So, we are at a beer, or are we at a doer?
I would say beer.
Beer.
Well, let's give some ideas of doing, and it's so funny because
that our only main character have nothing to do with the overall story.
I'm going to try. And I can even, the problem is with the example I'm going to give you, I could argue this into
Don't argue it. Just make your point. Don't try to argue yourself out
when
of it.
When she feels she's not ready to take her vows, she goes out into the world. She tests out her aunt's life.
Okay, no, she's thrown out.
No. 2/3 of the way through the movie.
Okay. Why don't you, for the sake of argument, skip the last part.
Oh, okay.
I think there's a real disconnect structurally with how that thing progresses. Because I think what's going on at that point skews the entire argument in a very weird way.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not sure that it's broken, but I think it feels like, oh, we're in a completely different movie. One that I didn't see coming because I thought it was pretty much over,
right.
And yet not quite. I mean, it wasn't resolved.
I don't feel like it was.
It wasn't resolved, but it was like you feel like, okay, this is the natural progression of where it was going to end up, and of course it does end up there. But so I mean, up until she goes back, which she's supposed to, based on the time limit, the artificial time limit that's set up. That's part of the reason it feels fake. Remember, she's got a very specific time she has to be back for her vows.
It actually says the time?
Yeah, she's got a week, but they don't pay any attention to it. But she ends up having to go back there. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah. She still makes a decision.
Right. No. But they don't. It's not a time lock, and they don't say it's a time lock. But they set this up, and they have it so she artificially has to go back.
Right.
She has to make a decision by then. Well, not really.
Except not.
Yeah.
I mean, for some reason, the moment I'm hung up on is when her aunt is breaking into the guy's apartment and she opts to leave. Which I don't know if that's doing or being. Like, it feels like doing.
Well, every single instance, she basically, she sees someone she likes, she just sits there. She just observes and bees. She does not do anything about it. Until after the damn aunt dies, and after she goes back. But prior to that, she does not do anything. Everybody's always approaching her. Everybody's always, and then when there is a conflict, she steps back and the aunt steps in. Virtually every time, but not every time, but most of the time up until 2/3 of the way through the story.
Right.
Okay, so let's go with beer initially. I will again do a nice dotted underline. Let's just leave problem-solving style out of this for the moment. We're having a hard time with the easy ones. Okay, driver. This one should be pretty easy.
Action.
Because,
Well, they kick her out.
that's a pretty good
That's a
one.
pretty good action. I think the implicit thing is she takes her vows at the end, but maybe that's cheating. 'Cause that's
Well, we don't see that. We don't
Okay.
see the vows.
That's main character stuff. I mean.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Yeah.
There is
they
a definite
dig up the bodies.
There's a big act. Yes, okay. We have the
That's
act
another
turn
one.
of the aunt committing suicide.
Right.
And they dig up the corpses and then they just rebury them somewhere else.
Mhm.
Right, but it's the son comes to them and says,
I get it.
you know,
I'll show you if you get up your house.
right. Even though it seems to be a decision, it's like if he hadn't even approached, there would not be a decision to make. He
Right.
basically already made that thing, made that. And of course, when they bury the family, that kind of closes a big chapter in that story.
Mhm.
So it definitely seems to be action, and that's one of the reasons why I think we're having this whole do or beer problem, is that it's an action, and she's likely a beer, but so much of the story that has to do with anything to do with digging up the past requires action, and the stuff that doesn't, which is all the watching the music and hanging around guys or this or that, that's more her stuff, and she's
a fish out of water.
or relationship, whatever. But it's definitely much more. It's not action driven. That's where she's dealing with it as a main character.
Right. Well, strangely, the one that I really felt the most was I think she's a start character.
That she is.
Yeah, and which is usually not something I.
I thought you were saying that at least before. I thought you said Wanda was a start character.
I was.
Yeah, that's what you said. You're waiting for her to holding out for something to begin. If it's a steadfast, or if it's a change, if she's a change
maybe it
character,
was.
then she needs to step up to the plate.
Yeah.
I think
She's
built
holding out
together.
for something to start? What is she holding out to start?
I don't know that that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
He'd
Well-
actually made. I thought you had made
Right,
an argument
no, I
for
did.
Wanda
No,
as a
you're right.
start character,
I did. You're
which
right.
is why you thought Wanda was a change character,
I
which
did.
meant the main character was a steadfast
Yeah,
character.
you're right. You're right.
Which means this question wouldn't have had anything to do with what you had said.
Right. We're editing that out.
I think she's
I want to
she's
edit out the
waiting
whole first
to-
10 minutes.
to see. I think she's waiting for answers to pop up. For answers to start showing as to what her own dilemma is in terms of should I be a man or not. Just she's looking at.
Right. She
I
doesn't
don't
seem. I mean, if she's a steadfast character, she doesn't seem to be set by external problems, and if she's a change character, she does not seem to have a chip on her shoulder. I mean,
Mhm.
either way,
Yeah.
you see that she's probably not a stop character. Which indicates she's likely to be a start character.
You can put a
Which we
wavy
will-
line under that one.
But I will put a wavy line under start. We're a little more secure, but still not perfect. And she's probably holistic, but I don't know that.
I would say she's
Time lock or option lock, story limit.
optional.
Yeah, is it
well-
because
Don't tempt me.
Uh,
Well,
see, I think it was stated as a time lock. It was not.
No.
It was not. Well, actually, I think it was structured as a time lock, but it is not a time lock. I think that's really what's going on. They said a time lock, and they behaved as if it's a time lock, but it really isn't a time lock because they didn't get the crisis when the crisis wasn't driven by that. She had to go through she had to sow her oats in a certain number of worldly ways.
Because here's the goal, at least for her as arguably a protagonist, which I don't know, she may be part protagonist. But the goal is for her to take her vows, right? And so in order to take her vows, the first thing she needs to do is hook up with her family member.
No, that's not the story goal. You mean that's her own personal goal?
Oh, well.
That's not the story goal because there's nobody else in the story cares a whit about it except for her. And she gives that up halfway through.
It does seem like, okay, so, in terms of options, it's like, okay, I have not exhausted my options in order to get from here to there. I need to go out and, and live out in the world for a bit and have some sex and, and I'll flirt with that.
Okay.
Last Temptation of Ida,
Right, but just be careful. You're stating it in a way that I don't think it's I think what you're saying is what's going on, but not the motive in the way that you're stating it. In other words, this does not come from her. This is not something that she was seeking. It is not something that she initiated. This is essentially they kicked her out because she needed to do all this. She needed to grow.
Mm-hmm.
She had to understand what she was getting into for them to accept her as forsaking all of that. You can't forsake something you've never tasted. So they wanted her, they saw this as, they didn't, then of course, this is not stated, except for the fact that what she says right at the beginning, which was they're forcing me out to go talk to my family member who didn't adopt me when I was a baby, my only living family member who didn't adopt me as a baby, and I don't know anything else about my family at all. Not even she didn't even know she's Jewish. So all of that is what lovely Auntie dumps on her when she shows up at the doorstep.
Right. So the options that I sort of see her going through, and I feel like this is a very artsy way of saying it, but it's that the first part of the movie is all about she's supposed to go out and experience stuff. When she goes out, she experiences sort of death and loss. And then the last third you told me to ignore is when she sort of goes out and experiences life. And those are the two options. Because
I would say the first part is all about discovery. I mean, really, she's discovering all of these things are new to her.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not about death. The deaths have already happened. The only death that happens.
But she's experiencing them for the first time, maybe. I don't know. That's what I'm saying.
She knows her mom and dad are dead. She knows she's an orphan, so that's not news. She doesn't know how or who they were.
Yeah.
So it's news to us. But I mean, she's grown up knowing that her parents are dead.
Yeah.
So that's I think the whole first part is about basically about discovery, and she's learning all these things about herself and her family and her aunt, and she wants to find out more. She's the one who keeps on digging, and then the aunt starts sort of helping them, reluctantly and non-obviously at first, and then aunt really sort of takes over and pursues it aggressively using her techniques.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's it's not until the end where the latter part of it, the second half of the movie, where Ida is really starting to really pursue those things. She hadn't even considered them to begin with, and then she starts considering them, and then it's like, okay, maybe I can flirt with it, and it's like, no, I've seen an example of what the other side lives like, which is her aunt is the antithesis of, is the slut and the saint, and she's like, okay, we'll try the slut way, and then I'll have an idea of where my choices are in life, and the last option, and this is where I think it's an option lock, and this is why it ends appropriately, is after you've done the slutty thing, you settle down, you get married, you do this and this, and then, and there isn't anything more than that. Whereas the church has an answer for her. What happens after that? There's always an answer, and that's why she chooses to go back, because there is an end to that. There's no end to that. And that's why she's, it's not like she regrets doing it, and she doesn't regret leaving it, because she has an answer where the laymen don't. And she grew up with that, and it's exactly the way that she thought it was going to be, but now she knows she's coming from a place of knowing as opposed to a place of ignorance. And I think that's if nothing else, that defines the difference between growth and resolve. Growth is about how do you get to that point where you really truly can make that choice, either to choose a new path or stay the path that you've always followed. The influence character shows that alternative path, and it's like she gets to that point. It's like, I have my aunt's path, who followed a certain path. I know exactly where that one ended for her, just jumping out the window. Which was started off with a boy, and had a child and all a career and all this stuff, and ended up with her killing herself. Or I go the path that I do know, which is the path of life and life eternal, and I'm going to go with the one I thought I was going to go with.
Does she?
Yeah, I think I think that part of it is very clear in terms of her choices. There were no choices for her at the beginning. She did not even know that there was an alternative. And that would have become a problem for her. The church, the nuns basically think, at some point, these things are going to come up. And if you're in a position where you cannot do anything about it because you've already committed yourself to God, this will be a problem for us.
Right.
And that doesn't seem, when you say she goes from a place of ignorance to a place of knowing, you don't see that as, how do you differentiate
This is the difference.
that?
This is the difference between change, growth, versus paradigm shift, change. Okay, so you can be blinded. You can have blinders on, and then see, and yet still take the same path that you would have taken with your blinders on, which is what she does. She starts off with blinders and says, I'm going to go down this path. Then she slowly takes off all the blinders and she sees the full dose of reality. And she goes, and knowing all of this, and the fun stuff and the not fun stuff, I'm still going to go down that path that I originally chose. And I'm going to go back. And this is, and more than anything else, this is the biggest problem why, when we named the resolve of change.
So will you change it, please? No, I'm actually being serious.
No, I understand that. I don't know. Maybe we will. But the problem is, change occurs everywhere, and growth. Most people do not separate growth from resolve. They all just see it as change. And unfortunately, just like you have a happy ending, well, no. You have success, you have good. Or you have a sad ending, a tragic ending. Well, that's a failure. But if you don't separate them apart, you can never really understand the different combinations. In this case, because people mistake growth, or they blend growth with resolve, it always looks like your main character has to change, because they always have to grow. They must grow. Your subjective characters must grow. Even your steadfast characters have to grow. But do they change their paradigm? Do they adopt? Really, the question is, do they adopt the paradigm of the influence character, or does the influence character adopt the paradigm of the main character? That's the change. Change is when they adopt the alternative perspective. Steadfast is when they stay the course and the influence character adopts their perspective. And for someone who also had her own blinders on, because both of them started in the same place, one had a full understanding of her aunt had a full understanding of all of this, and was excluding anything except the indulgent, self-interested side of things. And the other flip side was someone who did not consider herself at all, was looking at things from completely the moral perspective. And in order to really live, you have to be aware of both sides. And as far as her aunt goes, once she has sort of become a full person again, she knows realistically the only direction would be for her to go, essentially, not become a nun, but to really follow a righteous path by her own definition, not by somebody else's definition, and she was not willing to do the work. So she was too bitter, too much other stuff, too much baggage.
What was the indication that she would want to follow a righteous path?
Well, that's essentially what Ida, her, not only Ida, but her sister. She was, remember how she was, her sister would do, anything for this kind of stuff, and I was always the one who ran out and did stuff, but she would stay at home. It's like it was so not in her nature, it was so counter to her nature, that she understood that she had this huge weight of history that she's dealing with, and she was not willing to give it up, except just like end it. that was because truly, if she was going to be a true change character, she would have, and this is the act we did not see, because it's also would feel really kind of corny, but it would have been the one where she cleans up her act. That would have been,
Where Wanda
cleans up her act. Pulls back, goes back to her job as a prosecutor, whatever.
That would be like the cheesy.
She'd be the healed. She'd become healed and really follow her own path that she wanted to be on,
But
that she
instead,
was. She just cut it off prematurely.
Is that where you're saying they're structural?
Right, because essentially the subjective story and the influence character died at the end of Act 3.
Okay.
Stopped at the end of Act 3. But the overall story, more or less, was kind of sort of finished, except for that the main character through line wasn't. And it's like, well, we still have to finish out the rest of our story.
Yeah.
And I think that's, and it's fine, but that's why it just feels like it overcompensates, because she's got to carry the whole movie at that point. So everything for Ida is sort of really wrapped up and compacted in a very short period of time. When it would have been realistically, that would have been her third act. I mean, the third and fourth act would have been blended together, and the overall story would have ended around the time toward the end of the movie, with the burying of the children, the remains and stuff, and then Wanda would still possibly commit suicide, but because she can't handle it. But then it would have been a lot more tragic, as it is now, and she just sort of just exits stage left and leaves the cigarette smoking.
So just to recap, you can start out with blinders on, and then have some change, but then go back to the blinders even though you have.
No, she doesn't have blinders. That's
Well,
the difference. It's the
obviously,
choice. There's a choice. The question is whether or not you really understand what the choice you're making. And a steadfast character up front. See, this is the thing about a steadfast character. At the beginning of a story, they are required to take a stand. Which way are you going? Are you going this way or are you going that way? When they look backwards, it's like, well, I've always been going this way. I'm going to go I'm going to continue down the same path. And then everything else that the influence character comes in tries to challenge that. And, opens up their eyes, or you can just as easily have someone who is slowly building those blinders, so that I'm going to see less and less and less and less and less, so I can not think about everything because I know I want to go on that path. But Richard Kimball is someone who sort of he just gets more and more tunnel vision, as opposed to widening up like she does, like Ida does, because she starts off with tunnel vision, You know, he starts off, he's very worldly, and then he just becomes, his world focuses then down to a single person by the end. In The Fugitive.
Oh.
I was just saying. So the idea of a steadfast character is you have to commit to something, right? When that inciting event happens, consciously or not, you are committed on a certain path, and you will follow that path, and it will be challenged, and the challenges will change and twist and weaken your resolve, or they could change and twist and build your resolve. If you have a very solid resolve, where do you go from there? Then you turn out to be somebody like James Bond, where the likelihood he was going to change, really, it becomes fairly very one-dimensional, as opposed to a character like in Casino Royale, or where it feels like you've got someone who's certainly driven, but they are not secure in their worldview. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
I see now the growth. I see what I was.
Yeah, and this is the since we have a room full of Dramatica consultants, this is the, in terms of confusion, this is the biggest area of confusion you constantly run in, and it's.
She had a really cool story form that worked out if she has changed because everything else fell into place. So I was trying to argue for that, but I see what you're saying.
Well, and the thing is, because it's not structured properly, it's kind of hard to say which one it will be right. That's why we'll try it. We'll try a couple different ways and see how it works out. All right. So
Option one.
yeah, it would definitely seems to be. It seems like it was
option lock.
It's supposed to be an option lock. Again, I think it was structured as a time lock, not intentionally, but it was built in there, and then they kind of ignored it. So it felt like, wait, why isn't this over? Yeah. Okay. Success or failure? What is the goal? Digging up the past?
Success. It's really what happens.
Okay.
I mean,
something completely different, but.
Well, what is it? I mean, we don't know what the
no,
goal. We don't know. I'm not sure
totally
that the goal is saying, hiding the past might be the,
See, and this is where I interpreted her pulling out all the pictures and stuff, that it was so overwhelming that
she can't take it.
So like, everybody's so weighted down with all this stuff, all this crap that happened in the past, and in the end, you can't really get past it. You just are stuck with all the memories of it, and so I felt like that was the consequence of the end of the story. It's like a failure to me that her there, and then also the guy crying in the dugout grave, that he's just like so overwhelmed with all the memories of what he'd done. I just took more everybody instead of just who's my family. Oh, I dug up the body.
Right, and that's the thing is that if Wanda is the protagonist, then it would seem to be, because she's not trying to dig it up. She's been.
But her actions are saying we're going to try to find your parents. We're going to try to find out where your parents are buried. She's the one who's most actively pursuing that.
But Wanda knows an awful lot.
I feel like what she's pursuing is she wants
some closure.
Simon, the dad, to pay for it.
Or at least confront him. At least some closure on that point.
I mean, I feel like that's what she's after.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
from a personal standpoint, but from a logistical standpoint,
but look, when we first see her, what is she doing? She's a prosecutor. She's the one prosecuting crimes during World War II crimes.
Trying to find balance with justice, just to reestablish justice.
Well,
Right.
She wasn't just prosecuting World War II crimes. She's also destroying enemies of the state, anti-communists. That was
Right,
also her thing,
right.
too. And that was more so than just World War II stuff. It was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay, maybe that is.
crime had to do with the flower bed that was.
Yeah. It was more that
Saber.
I guess in 1950s Poland there was a lot of, bad justice, where they went after enemies of the state.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's what she was doing.
Now, Poland was behind the Iron Curtain at that time.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it was
this is
part of the
her-
Soviet Union.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it was a protectorate or what? It was. Yeah, it wasn't a republic, but it was part of the.
But to show how pro-communist they would destroy people that perhaps weren't as guilty as.
Right. So, I mean, we'll have to figure out what the goal is in order to be able to determine success or failure.
I just didn't- well, and then if you play,
I mean, it sure doesn't. Let's put it this way: if you look at the objective characters, how do they fare at the end of the story?
miserable.
Yeah, they're all much worse off at the end than they are at the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean,
but besides Ida and Wanda, who else are we talking
Well,
about?
the guy in the graveyard, everybody.
Well,
The
I mean,
the father, his son, his
No,
son's
that's not
family.
individual.
yeah, but okay, fine. Emotionally, yeah, they're in a bad place, but
Yeah, well,
but
we're
logistically
thinking
speaking,
right. Yeah, exactly.
that didn't they like, basically, the point is for her to sort of discover the truth about herself and her life and her origins, and they did that
Yeah, but
logistically.
I wonder.
Right.
But the consequences, are
Or the costs.
Or the
It
costs,
might
I
be a
mean, I'm sorry,
cost
the
issue,
costs.
too.
Yeah.
are pretty nasty.
It's such a cheese ball. So everybody's story judgment. Everybody thinks it's bad then.
No.
Success.
Sorry, judgment.
It's
No,
good.
no,
It's
judgment
no way
is-
this a
Judgment is good.
So it's
Because
not-
she's completely okay with her choice.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
So then it's not a triumph.
No, it's not a happy ending. Who said it's a
No,
happy
so it's
ending?
failure good, right? Is that what we're getting at?
I would think it's a.
It feels like a bittersweet ending. I know.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely seems like she's okay.
She's good with it, right? Okay, I got that right. Yeah.
I think,
You go to a hand
I think
up
she's
somewhere.
good, but I wonder if it's not so much success with really high costs.
What?
Well, the thing is it's really hard. It's hard to say that it's successful when one of the principles jumps out the window.
Yeah.
Right. But isn't that more impact factor through line stuff?
But I don't think it's a thing where it's like the
No, but if
goal
you're
is
talking about sort of, well, okay, it's finding the past, but it's
dealing with the past. It's not like a singular sort of. It's not one of those singular. You have to find the bodies, and when we
But
find
you
the
see,
bodies, it's success.
is the truth about the past going to come out? No. No, because she made the deal that you show us where the bodies are, and you get to keep the house. And the reason you get to keep the house is because you killed our parents. But we're not going to bring you up. The past is going to remain buried.
Yeah.
Objectively, the past is going to remain buried.
Yeah, it's because I contextualize the goal differently in my head. It
Well-
wasn't as much digging up the past as it was learning, gathering information. It was learning what happened.
Possibly understanding what happened. But
Yeah, we'll figure that out. Okay, let's leave it unanswered then. We'll just leave the good success failure. We want to say good. Okay, fine. So let's do the domains. No, this is going to answer some of the questions we've got that we're. Okay, so let's identify overall story. Where do we see the overall story and why?
I think it's
situation.
I think it's the activity road trip thing. Going on the road to find out what happened to the family.
Okay, so you see, this is the activity is okay. Now, how does that involve everybody else except the main and influence character?
Well, because they're being basically fetched for information. Like they're interrogating them. They're trying to figure. They need to go
Okay.
fix people's brains.
Back up. This is a problematic external process.
Well, there are two.
What is the problematic external process? What is the process that is going on that's causing conflict?
Well, there's two people on the road digging their noses in things that people don't want anything to. Basically, they don't want that stuff to come out.
Okay, where does that happen before they end up at the home at that house?
But that happens. The house is in Act 1, right?
Okay, but if they go to the house, there's no activity conflict that goes on, correct?
Well, I know it's really light, but I think it has to do with them trying to get to the right person. It's kind of connecting the dots.
But that's not no. That's not saying. Okay, go ahead.
No, I'm going to make a situation argument. I don't want to interrupt this.
Okay. See, the only problem I have with it is that at the beginning, I don't see a conflict, a process at the beginning. The inciting event.
Right.
What is the process that's going on that is troublesome? What is it that has to be brought? What activity has to be brought to an end to resolve in success that isn't if it's a failure?
Well, it's because my only other argument would have been.
No. Another. You can't say because it's not B, it's going to be A. That's because it's not a time lock. It's an option lock. No, I don't go for that. You need to make an argument for this.
Well, in my mind, it starts for that area. That would start somewhere in the scene where she is confronted by her aunt for the first time.
Okay, so the novitiate and her aunt.
Yeah.
Okay. No, we can't include those people for the most part to try to really make that process. But what activity is troublesome even with those two characters, even though they're our main influence character?
Well, yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I was.
I interrupted you. Sorry.
No, that's all right. I would be referring to the inquiry of two people, indeed trying to dig up the past. So it's problematic because they encounter people who don't necessarily want to speak or have dark secrets.
So now, does the inequity grow from the inquiry, or does the inequity grow from the fact that something happened in the past that's hidden? Is there a problem in the past? If there is, that's the source. If there isn't, then the fact that they're looking for something could be problematic. And that's really sort of the big difference. If there is a problem in the past, if there's a situation, it's stuck, and maybe people don't want that past to be discovered.
But is that really stuck? Does that qualify as an external?
Yeah, there was a murder and a cover-up. All happened. There are dead bodies buried in a forest.
But
that's a situation. It's the fact that they're dead bodies and the dead Jews that were murdered and buried in a forest is the problem. And the fact that it's being covered up by everybody who knew them, that's also a problem. But that's essentially that's a situation.
Right. And how do you differentiate what is the actual source of conflict if it's the fact that happened in the past or that it's being covered up now?
No. The cover-up happens before the story even began.
I can tell you one way that I'm just thinking this through now. They're looking for Simon at a certain point, and so they ask after him, right? And people actually help him. People say, "Oh, I don't know, but ask that person," and then they do, and we see them banging on the door, and it's like that person comes out and says, "Oh, he's not here; he's in the hospital." So
I hope he doesn't. He might be home tomorrow, but maybe later. I hope it's later.
So it's like that.
Much conflict.
There's almost no conflict. It's
right.
Anti-conflict. It's frictionless progress at that point.
Right.
That's why it's not an activity problem.
Right.
Whereas in this situation is there are real dead people murdered and buried and whose property has been stolen.
And like our situation argument I was going to make earlier, I don't think it's totally always works this way, but the tension when they go up to the house is you are in our house.
Right.
And that's
I used to live here.
Stuff.
That's what she says. I used to live here.
So that's the That's the
Right.
situation.
Yeah,
And of course, we don't necessarily know exactly why it's so a problem. That's very, very slowly revealed to us.
and I also think there's a more sophisticated argument too about, and even Sam says this too, about World War II Iron Curtain Poland. Like that's the situation that everybody's stuck in there, the bleak landscape, everything. That's part of the story. I think. I don't think that's just curtain dressing.
No, it's storytelling, but it is. No, because this could have been placed anywhere.
See, I don't agree with you. I think that
here's my counter argument to that.
Yeah.
Is in the Iron Giant.
Uh-huh.
It's like it's Cold War, so it feels sort of like, oh, it's this thing that it all has to do with the Cold War because everyone here is influenced by American stuff. But it's actually the situation is like, no, there's this giant that's landed in the ocean.
I see that there's both.
Well, right. But part of it is storytelling. I mean, it's so much storytelling that we don't have. They don't talk about it.
But I think the issue
we don't know about it, but we can still understand the story.
No, I understand it, but the issue of threat in Iron Giant comes from the Cold War attitude. So I think
you're right. I was thinking that as psychology. And you're right. It's the situation.
The issue that this is going to show up to be is part of what it's like to live. What it was like to live in Poland at that time. I think that'll be part of the issue.
I don't think so, only because I didn't even know if it was part of the USSR at that point. I suspected it was under its control, but I was Googling it while I was looking. So obviously everybody's really kind of tense, but they're drinking and singing, and it was clearly not the Gestapo-ish kind of,
No, but I think the weight of what it was like to have gone through that time is part of the story.
It may be.
Yeah. All right,
that because I'm unfamiliar with it, I didn't pick up on that. So I don't think it's. I don't think it. I think it may contribute to the effect of it. It's not essential because you could just as easily put it in Pennsylvania, and someone goes back home who's been adopted and wants to find out where their family is, and there's this big cover-up over, oh, your family was killed and blah blah blah, and they're buried and.
Only if there was a history of why that cover-up was there.
No, it's just that's an intensity thing.
Okay.
See, otherwise, Ida would be there because she's Jewish. But it's Jewish. The fact that she's Jewish is a non-issue.
Now it is. I'm talking.
No, in the story, it's a non-issue. I'm not talking about historically. History is real world.
No,
this is not real world. We were watching a movie.
I totally understand that.
So let's just stick with the movie because there's a whole lot of stuff in that I had questions about.
Okay.
Like the difference with that scene about whether or not it's an anti-socialist behavior or it's a.
She fought anti-socialism.
Yeah, it's like I didn't know. I didn't really understand that until they said it at the funeral.
Yeah.
How was that a double negative? That was her.
She was fighting anti-socialism,
right,
so she was a socialist.
Yeah, right.
That's why.
But that's 3/4 of the way through the movie that I found that out. I didn't realize that's what the trial was about.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So it was not essential. It helped flavor it, and probably in the thematic area it'd probably be really important because when we get into the theme part, but not in the domains. So what's the argument for situation?
Oh, my argument was you're stuck in our house. I think that's the way it comes out in that scene, but I think.
Well, what's the big picture?
The big picture is, isn't it what you said?
Okay, but I want somebody else to say it other than me.
People have been murdered and it's been covered up.
Okay, and so the story is over when that's discovered?
Well,
seems like one of the objectives.
It did kind of feel like that to me, to be
I don't think
honest.
it's resolved.
Or no, maybe they need to be buried in the right place. But it did feel very much at that point that to me that the story was over and it became much more about how Wanda and Ida dealt with that after that story was over.
Okay. And so how does that put the relationship in fixed attitude?
Well, it's like devout versus
what?
Profane.
Profane. Yeah, that's the word I was thinking. I put carnal. Yeah, profane.
devout versus
Oh,
profane.
devout. Okay.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
Jesus loved people like me.
Okay. All right.
Right.
Yeah.
Really, I'm gonna stay in and sleep and let you
I mean,
do it.
here's like personally, I'm split down the middle between the two arguments. I agree it should be in the external domain for the OS and for the RS for the relationship. You know, I keep going back and forth between manipulation and fixed attitude. You know, there's certain aspects where Ida feels very fixed attitude, but then there were times when she felt very kind
Can I
of
ask you a
psychology.
Sure.
So how you know all those movies where like with the whodunits and things like that? A lot of them, right, have their OS and activity understanding.
Right.
So that's
And
not what I was shooting for anyway. But that's just a rhetorical question. How do you differentiate a movie like that where a murder is being committed and it's already in the past, obviously, and it's triggering conflict in the inquiry?
You don't remember the rest of the story. It's part of the problem.
Okay.
Remember, the story is about water.
Which are you talking about?
Chinatown. The story is about water.
Oh, I'm not talking about China. I wasn't talking about Chinatown.
I
Sorry.
was gonna say that's a perfect example. He wants to know how do you differentiate whodunits, because all the whodunits, most of the whodunits in the story forms are all in understanding. And he wants to know how come, and I would say, oh, use Chinatown as an example, which is what you're
Right.
giving.
However, the main character is the one who's in understanding. He's the one who's constantly misunderstanding things. And the situation is that there is a part of the valley that's going to be that is currently unincorporated, that's going to become incorporated into Los Angeles, and whoever owns it, who has possession of it, will be the
Filthy rich.
yeah. Essentially, it'll be partitioned into the county, and so the water rights are really important. But anyway, so it has to do. It's the difference between whether you're doing it about a murder has happened, we need to discover what the murder is, and then you have the sleuthing going on.
Right.
Just okay, as opposed to we have an activity of some activities going on with all of this stuff, and then you have if it's a detective who's sort of this person defined by their used to be a cop, you know, and now everything has to do with the fact that he used to be a cop, and that's a problem for him, or something like that. His status,
Right.
you know, he's the PI, no longer one of the
Right.
gang. You know,
Right.
that would be a situation kind of a character.
Right.
Or fixed attitude or whatever.
Right.
But it has really
I was more trying to put side to side an OS. So basically, crime is being committed, and an OS that would be in activity, and an OS that would be in situation like this. That's what I'm trying to differentiate, basically.
Well, like crime has been committed. The problem is that the crime has been unsolved.
Okay.
That would be in a situation.
Okay.
Usually, if it's an activity, crimes are being committed, and you need to stop them from being committed.
Oh.
Usually, it's Bonnie and Clyde. It's an ongoing process.
Okay. So
as opposed to.
So like the Orient Express type of thing would be more situational than activity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Got it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case.
Are they stuck on a train in that?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's situational. It's situational in just about every definition of that way. I mean,
but I guess Agatha Christie more general.
Right. But the train itself isn't a problem. Yeah. See, that's the thing. Is it is defining it as a situation, but from conflict, a murder has happened, and everybody was in this place and is staying in this place until it's resolved. Because you could have people stuck on an island, but then they're all being murdered.
Right.
So where's the problem? If they can't,
Indians.
Yes. All right. So situation or activity. So we're going to try a situation at least initially. I mean, I agree. There's sort of this.
Her impact on Ida, it doesn't come from her situation. It comes from her activities, what she does.
Right. I mean, she's the one taking her out to these different places,
It's not
and also
it's not
her
she is.
drinking and her sleeping
Ida
around.
lets herself be manipulated by everybody.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. No, that's the
Yeah,
to me that's the
because
strongest one.
that's
Putting
the
Wanda
passive
under
aspect of it.
activity. Really,
Not the being
yeah.
aspect of it, but the passive aspect is that she's acted upon, not the activator.
Right.
Yeah. So she is experiencing things. She is not engaged. Okay. So this would be the overall story is situation. The main character is manipulation or psychology. And I think psychology in this case is a better term because manipulation, unless you're looking at it passively being manipulated. The relationship is fixed attitude. That's the saints or whore.
Yeah.
And the OS, the influence character Wanda.
Yeah, it makes sense. Memories, impulsive responses, innermost desires, contemplations. That sounds more like the relationship than the character. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's.
Right.
And you see, with Wanda, memories becomes a really big issue.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because when there was this big changing one's nature signpost, it made me think, obviously that's main character, but then I thought, or is that relationship? Even though Wanda's dead already, but is the relationship still playing out?
Are you going to change over to?
Yes, I'll do that. But
so we're going to switch over to the software at this point. Oh, sorry, I'll block that. Good.
Just while you're doing this, one thing I found an interesting thing is that Wanda, who could have really seemed dead set to kind of bring all this stuff out, isn't the one who makes the deal not to bring it out. Ida does.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I anticipated there to be an argument over that. And then there just wasn't. I thought that was just an interesting story.
Again, it was very minimalistic storytelling. So, for better or for worse. But, because they were relying so much more on just the mood and the visuals than very much dialogue.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. So let's see. What can we choose? Well, we chose action.
So we know.
I know. Now we have our overall story. It's going to be situation. Main character is manipulation. Oh, look! It's a start beer character.
What ones did you pick so far? Sorry.
I selected driver, action, limit, option lock, judgment, good, domain, situation for the overall story, and the main character, domain, manipulation.
So just go ahead and pick the past for the OS.
Yes.
I think that's probably a good idea. I think we do that. And we have the main character developing a plan. I think that's I think conceptualizing is a better term for that rather than developing a plan.
Just trying to figure out who she is, right?
Right, right. Trying to figure out who she is, how
putting the
things
pieces
work.
together. It's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle.
Well, and especially since
even if she's reluctant to do that.
Well, she's a bird who's been just kicked out of the nest and said, "Don't come home until you need to go out there," and then they didn't really say anything else. It's not like they set a goal. They just said, literally an inciting event, we're kicking you out here. Oh, and by the way, you have to see your aunt, the one who did not adopt you, as a child.
Yeah.
So they set up all the dynamics and just said, well, it'll work its way out, and she'll come back, or she won't, depending on what's necessary. I want to just take a peek at the signposts. We don't normally do that, but I just want to look at them, just to see the effects of some of these choices, because we have some ideas of some of that. So, for instance, our influence character, memories, do we see that as her Act 3 or Act 4?
Isn't that their relationship, memories?
Oh, I'm sorry, the relationship. I'm sorry, yeah, the relationship.
Well, the whole, I mean, stuff, because for me the whole thing is Ida's presence is making her relive all these memories.
So you think that's where they start?
I'm saying that.
I don't think the memory.
I think that's the whole shebang.
Well, that would be the
concern. Well, it would be.
Yes.
That's the concern.
Yeah.
Since it says any of two on each of them, can we see like what each of them? Choice? Yeah, it says any of
for
two.
The influence character.
For influence, so that's under.
Oh.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's under activities. Never mind.
Right, that's the influence character.
Position on the screen.
Okay. With the past, sure. What about the past? Is that Act 3? Or Act 4? Let's see.
It's such a crapshoot, though.
Huh?
It's such a crapshoot, though, because you can.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Here's the thing. The final act seems to be either truncated or missing in certain points. I wonder if signpost 4 is the future, because where would the future be? When you talk about the future, you really don't see really don't see the future come up as any kind of
John Coltrane is the future.
And see that that was one of those points that was left out. That's why I wonder if signpost 4 is like the future, and that's what's
we
missing.
We can leave that anyway. I just think
just a.
Well, I was thinking an influence character. If is signpost 3 going to be obtaining, because that's when they dig up the bodies.
Let's try that.
No.
It does very little. Although what it did do, if you look in the overall story, it really didn't do a whole lot. Yeah, it's very strange how sometimes it can have an amazing effect and sometimes it doesn't. All right, let's go back to the.
What about main character?
No, let's
No.
Yeah, let's not do that. We can do that, and unless we can actually make an argument. That's the problem. Let's look at some of the issues. So we have the overall story concern of the past, and then we've got fate, prediction, interdiction, and destiny. That's a good set. Awesome. No question that works really nicely. Because you've got the whole thing with, why am I not in there? That's part of that argument.
I'm sorry. What?
When she asks the son who was just unburied all the graves and who's the one who killed them,
So
why didn't you do that? Well, but
I feel really strongly about fate, but
that could also be interdiction. Why did you intercede on my path, on my behalf? In the consequence memories, I think that's where where you see Wanda, where she is. She's basically showing what the consequence is, which is why it feels like such a strange ending, because it doesn't. You can see that as for her and for the other guy, the consequences are there, which means it does feel like it's a failure story. Yeah. But main character through line, that's okay. But for both those two players, as well as the father the one who's dying, and he knows what's been going on, and he's clearly pained by it. Which are really the only the people that are involved with it that we really see specifically. It does look like the consequences of what takes place. Forewarnings, what do we have there? Playing a role, conceiving an idea.
What about the benchmarks? Does that?
Sure, we can
Well,
do
the benchmarks are all the other three.
Yeah, so we have for the overall story, how things are changing, the future and the present.
For overall story, the only one seems like present, right?
It sure seems to be. I mean, they're looking how things are. I don't really see anything in the future in terms of that. There really isn't there is no change. I mean, it's not like things are getting better or things are getting worse. It just really does seem to be the present. I agree. And that gives us a benchmark of conceiving an idea for the main character, which I think works really well. She finally gets it, and that's what she goes, no, not for me. Benchmark of learning for the influence character, which we definitely see how much information, it's almost like how much Ida learns from.
Yeah, how much she can teach to her.
Yeah. Because she starts off with, very first bit is, you're Jewish. Your parents name were this, and they lived here, and they all died. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's a learning moment. But then, obviously, one of the other things that she learns is about her own son, and learns also about how to live, not how to drink, how to pick up men, how to smoke, how not to drive. And then the relationship contemplation. It's probably there's just so much freaking contemplation going on with that thing. So let's look, and again, that gives us requirements of the present, forewarnings of conceiving an idea. And I think that's interesting because you notice that getting an idea of what happened in the past is what ultimately brings about the bad memories for the son, for the father, for the aunt, the mother, essentially the mother of the boy who she gave up. Not so much for Ida because they're not her memories. She doesn't have any memory of that, so she's a little apart from that story in some ways. Let's see. Okay, so how about the issue for the main character?
Well, if you look, just to interject, like the signpost for the influence character, are okay.
Okay, so if we go there,
I did it right.
Wow.
Oh, and look, signpost 3 is obtaining, which is where we were. Yeah, so it looked. So we have influence characters, signposts. So signpost 1, understanding. 2, doing. 3, obtaining.
Signpost 2 is doing, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
That's when she actually engages and starts driving around and doing all the.
Well, I'm going out dancing and
Yeah.
Oh
yes.
That's
right.
her impact.
No, that's absolutely sorry. That is much more.
And if it's a handoff to the sax player, are we toying with that idea?
Yeah, it's kind.
It starts, but doesn't really follow through.
Yeah, I
So I
mean,
just feel like the learning is we're learning about what happened to her son and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's what happens after they bury the. Obtaining is getting the bones.
Yeah.
And then burying them, and then that's sort of. Finally, now the family is all together. And then the last part, though, is learning, and that's where I think that's the scene. But we basically see the fourth act of the influence character, and then we see the fourth act of the main character, and probably maybe even a little bit of the third act of the main character. Well, we do. We see a little bit at the tail end of the third act, and then we see the fourth act. So it's kind of done, paced oddly. because it really, I think it does a number on the relationship. But I think we might see in the relationship, whatever the fourth act, we might have that bit. Versus, we have probably.
But
I guess it's going to be
3. It says then you have 2. So the innermost desires and contemplation. And signpost 1 is.
That's this one. This is innermost desires. Or hospital implicit responses. Is that one of them? Not sure. I can see either way. Okay. So let's go back to our choices here. We have, I guess I'm going to save this, and I would like to go to the theme browser. Start to see some of our choices. So if we go into, let's see what do we have. Into the overall, this is the influence character. Let's go to the overall story and then zoom in here. So we have fate, prediction, interdiction, destiny. Knowledge, thought, chaos, and order is under fate. Actuality, perception, inertia, and change is under prediction. Ability, desire, equity, inequity under interdiction. And aware, self-aware, projection, and speculation under destiny. Anybody have a feel for any of those for the overall story? Okay. Knowledge, thought, order, and chaos. How does chaos fit into this?
Well, again, I would bring in the whole living in post-war Poland and all that stuff.
So where do we see that?
Well, if you think of...
Okay, is that supposed to be the solution?
No, I would say that was a problem. But this is when I saw it as a change, because I liked her going from chaos to order.
You liked her what?
Going from chaos to order. Like instead of all this random stuff like, oh, there's, you're Jewish, you're all the randomness of what she's supposed to do. Like, okay, now you're going to go visit your aunt. It's like, well, what do you mean? I was just here. And all of a sudden, all the stuff that she has to deal with. And then she eventually gets to a place where she's able to literally take, have order.
Go back to the order.
Go back to the order. Yeah, I thought that was great because it also put Wanda's influence character problem and desire, which I thought was like just so rad because she's so driven by her own passions and her own wants and desires. But that's if it's a change, and you mentioned that they argued that away from me. So,
well,
and I just like
rescue it.
The other thing I like is because it's fate. Everybody's dealing with the fate of like what they all had to do and just what happened in their past. She's dealing with the situation where she's a Jew. She didn't know it. Wanda has the influence issue of senses, which is all the sensual. Let's get it on, smoke, drink, and then
I think fate works fine for me.
The relationship issue would be the truth.
I'm okay with fate. I mean, I think that.
But it might change if you make it steadfast things. So.
I see.
Well, if knowledge, okay, because looking at the main character, I'm feeling like for her, the two possible pairs that might describe what she's going. One is inertia change, she's got an issue with, or aware, self-aware. The others don't quite. The other pairs don't quite resonate for the main character, but inertia change under state of being, which is grouped with knowledge thought, which will group. She has a problem with change. Being steadfast, I'm sorry. She has a problem. She's the solution of inertia. Wait a minute. Hang on.
No, that's right. You're right. The problem would be change.
Okay.
And she sees the solution as basically putting things, going down the course that has been planned, putting things back the way they were. And ultimately, for her, that's what she does. She basically says, she's like, I'm going to make sure that
If she's steadfast, she needs a drive, right?
that wouldn't be her drive. The drive would probably be
No, that's right.
knowledge.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
See, the knowledge would be the thing that would drive her. Her focus is on change. That she's not going to solve it, but knowledge is the thing that seems to motivate her, and so it starts right off with a bit of information, a bit of knowledge, and then she keeps on getting little bits more and a little bit more until she gets the carnal knowledge, and then that allows her to stay the course. She's basically she's driven to she's motivated by knowledge. Oh, you're Jewish. Oh, I guess I need to find out what that's all about.
So I saw that more as the symptom as far as her.
See, I since she doesn't change, I think
because that'll fall into prediction. That's why it's weird.
Or well, see, it'll either fall under put it under fate, or it'll put it under prediction. Yeah, you're right.
Oh, since knowledge is her focus or symptom.
No. The only way is if knowledge is her symptom, would it still remain?
Well, I mean, you can see her pursuing that, and then what do I think about it? I mean, you do see that, but that would give Wanda chaos, which I guess she has order at the end, which is ordering all the pictures, maybe. If you want so let's try this. So let's just rather than figure it out in my head. So for her motivation of change, the problem, she's driven by change. Well, actually, in terms of drive, yes, because basically that's introduced to her. It's not something that she does not like change. So when there's change, it's motivated. She gets motivated. But and having a knowledge.
Yeah, I'm still wondering if if change is the problem, or if that's the symptom.
Change seems to be the symptom, though. I mean, knowledge. What's the symptom? Then you have basically that's the one you were talking about. The chaos is the problem.
Chaos.
The solution and order doesn't really happen.
Which is right.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's a failure story. So that would have knowledge as the symptom.
I mean,
Okay. So we have for our influence character. The issue is instinct. The problem is chaos. Solution is order. His fairness is being the problem, and she needs to mess things up as a response. That doesn't sound right. The reverse of that, possibly. That's a lost no, that's the main character was Dallas on that. Alright, so
Good night.
Good night.
Oh, okay. Sure.
I'm completely stuck on a different story format to get my mind over there.
Alright, now if we look in the relationship, we have truth, evidence, suspicion, and falsehood. And evidence seems to pop up a lot. But it don't.
Is that what they really argue about?
I thought they argue about the truth. That's the
What
Jesus
is some
thing.
example?
Well, Jesus liked people like me. If we're talking about the whole devout versus profane. I thought this was the part
Why
where
is that?
say,
So is that the truth, or is that a falsehood? Certainly, truth versus falsehood. That sounds
Right.
fine. That's a lot better. To
But
me
it's
than
my
it
truth
is.
versus your truth. I think that was the argument being made. But
No, but
I
you
thought you were
don't-
going to say that that's the part where, because I think the relationship is not as fully developed as well.
And then you have the actuality perception, which I do like in the relationship. I think that's a good pair in the two of them. Because you certainly have sort of
So in my other story form, I had chaos, would be the problem in here as well, and inertia was their symptom between the two of them, and change was the response
in the relationship.
in the relationship, where it's like you need to get out and start getting it on.
Right. Well, let's see. The inertia is the problem. Relationship.
No, inertia would be the symptom.
Same thing. Let's just see what that looks like. I'm going to go back to the story on that.
Is there suspicion?
No. He picked
I did.
inertia as the
I picked that picture.
inertia.
Let's see, it's a steadfast story. All right, that basically brings it down to single story form. That's a success. Good.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
No way though. Perception is the overall problem. Is that what you think? Yeah, that's.
no, yeah, I don't think that doesn't sound right. I don't think that is right.
See, if you just do, can you just humor me? Even though I know you argued that
Go ahead.
change wasn't it. If you put change, and then what you have there, and then if you do the overall problem of chaos,
That doesn't bring it down to single story.
no, but because it leaves the problem solving.
Well, I don't need change. I can. Oh, I see. You already got the other ones.
And then the problem in the relationship is chaos as well.
I don't see the main character is a symptom of actuality and the response to perception. I did not see that at all.
Well, who she really is, and then she has to kind of see how she fits in, how she sees things.
That just doesn't seem like it's part of her argument at all. I mean, maybe from the outside, but not from the subjective view. It doesn't seem. She didn't seem to have a problem with the way things really are.
Would we even consider drifting to a completely different story form or not really?
Let's just we can. I just want to pursue this just a little bit more. Now, how do we get problem of chaos? How about let's look at our unique abilities. Main character, critical flaw. I need a 5. Oh, that's a harder number. Conditioning would be the one that immediately jumps out to me. I don't know why.
That would actually make her a change character. Yep. I knew that.
You see.
Because
Dang it! How'd you do that?
Because I'm Birdman.
That's great. I love
That's
that.
what you call
But I say I don't have any rationale for it.
what? Which one?
Her instincts, interpretation.
Just want to know how you figured that out.
From what notion?
Because
I've got not.
yeah, okay.
Let me just go.
Unique ability to be state of being, critical flaws, evidence. Okay. I do like a catalyst of truth in the relationship. Sure. I mean, I feel like we're just sort of meandering a bit. So let's try to narrow this down in the what?
No. Just get a single connection.
I'm gonna go to the story guide, and let's just and all topics.
These are first.
Not always, but this way we can narrow it down to a couple instead of a single one. So overall story issue.
Oh, where's that?
Destiny, fate, interdiction, or prediction.
Fate.
I see a little bit of interdiction in there,
Okay.
which is just there's a lot of inequity in how the Jews are treated versus everyone else. The courts are equity, even though that's again a really small part of things. There's a desire to keep all the stuff in the past. And then there's a question of, will we be able to find these people? That's ability. So I'd like that on a list.
All right. And then we have fate and destiny and prediction. Any of those? You like fate?
I like fate.
I like fate. Okay.
I don't like prediction. Does that count? Can we keep that
Yes.
Fine. And destiny doesn't seem to be it either.
Yeah, I don't feel that.
All right. So let's go to the main character and look at that issue. Which we've got 4 possibilities. We have sense of self, situations, circumstances, and state of being. So this would be what the main character is dealing with personally. Is she so hard?
Well,
We
to me,
just do not see it.
I like
True.
situation. But
I like state of being. I can go, yeah.
Situation. Sense of self does not immediately. I have no.
in circumstances, she's not like, right?
Wow. Well, that was brutal. Okay. So let's look at the influence character choices we have for our issue. So we have instinct and senses.
Where are we?
In the influence character issue, we have instinct and senses remaining. This would be, well, okay. For senses, I could see sort of like numbing the senses or being senseless, you know.
But she also talks about, you know, have you had sinful thoughts? You know,
That's the sinful thoughts is much more of a contemplation or something like that. But
still, it's sort of like get out and have some, you know, get some visceral, you know, knowledge of the world.
Well, there's a lot of music and people and so definitely you see her in very sensual environments. So that looks pretty good. So let's see where are we now if we go to the.
Are you including senses or instinct?
No, I wasn't including instinct, but you can. I don't know. I want to go back and see where we are on the story. So that.
Yeah, if you pick senses, you pick situation for the main character,
Right. Yeah.
which then gives us order, chaos, actual reality, perception.
And we have. Oh, interesting. Okay, so if I chose for the influence character symptom desire.
Oh, good. Oh, symptom of desire. Interesting. Sure.
Well, because I think that's where her attention is, and the problem where she's driven is knowledge, and she's avoided thinking about it at all. She does not think about it until Ida comes in, and Ida basically forces her to really think about it.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's now,
It gives us steadfast and holistic.
which I think that's probably accurate. Which it does again give us an outcome of success, which
Okay, I like response to order because then that's kind of my change solution. But now it's in the steadfast for responses order. I'll go with this one. I like this.
Oh, you will you?
Yes, because I like your argument for steadfast, and so, but this still gets my same story form, but from the steadfast angle. Yeah, it does. It's cool.
Okay. So we end up with,
And you just did that from picking symptom of desire, right?
right, I didn't make it the problem, I made it the symptom.
Symptom on the influence character,
Right.
because she sees.
I think in terms of her influence, the thing that seems to be troublesome, she sees, desires.
Why don't you give in to your desire?
Right. Whereas, okay, I wasn't able to, whether or not she could keep, what she can do. Like, I really can't. I can destroy you. I can, So she gets into trouble because of her desires, but she goes back to her abilities to try to get out of the problem. And that sort of playing that game seems to have the potential to mostly influence Ida. Ida, we see her problem of actuality basically shoved out into the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And she toys with perception, meaning, that's her playing with these, so what do we do next, and what do we do next, and, I can be this, I can be my aunt, I can be the temptress, or whatever, and it's like, no, I think I'm going to go back to the order.
Okay.
And also being kicked out, for her, it's a chaotic event. That's order. Yeah.
That was my.
That
was my.
Yeah, was
your
early on. Yes.
Okay.
I was in the bathroom.
I just want appreciation for that.
Okay.
That was
appreciation.
that was probably a half an hour ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want some. Thank you. Oh, was that holy water?
But you also see that in chaos and order in the relationship, with the problem between the two of them as inertia. So,
Right.
And I think in this instance, I think the relationship has a change. I think it ends up in change.
The relationship does.
I think the relationship, although we never address that part of the whole thing.
Well, you got it right there in the solution. So.
No, I know, but I think that
The only thing that's yucky is the outcome.
And again, I think, well, if you ended it when she first goes back, it sure looked like a success story. That's why I said, I think based on it's supposed to be a success story. She successfully goes out, manages the world, solves all her family problems, puts things in order, and then comes back home, comes back to the church. And granted, there's a lot of consequence in there, but ultimately the goal of the past is achieved. It is all revealed.
Because her one question, I think I remember her asking, is she says, "Did you kill me with an axe?" So she really wants to know what happened to her son, which she gets. There's never an indication that she's going to take this, even though we talked about this earlier. There's never actually an indication that she wants this knowledge to be disseminated. She wants to know.
You mean
Wanda?
Wanda, right?
Yeah, and she finds out.
Well, she finds out. She doesn't really find out. Didn't say it, but the person didn't take an axe to the head.
Right. I mean, they see.
That's still intact.
Right.
Yeah, we don't know exactly the method, but I think that. What's the matter?
No, it's interesting, like why it picked success.
But at the end, it feels resolved. It doesn't feel like anything is left undone. It's not that everybody's happy, and I guess that's the cost is understanding.
Yeah.
One that Wanda really was not willing to hang around bearing. Because for her, the understanding was I gave up my son. I'm responsible for my son's death,
Right.
and that cost is too high for her. But the past was basically revealed and corrected.
They're all thinking. They're all stuck with their thoughts. The overall characters. The guy in the grave. And
The thing that I like too.
We think we don't know. We don't see that. But Ida, having gone out and all created
But
all
having
this.
dug up the
doesn't-
past, she's brought about this solution of thought.
Right.
Now there's thought where there used to just be this
Yes.
hidden knowledge.
Yes.
Now these people are having to deal with their thoughts,
Right.
thinking about what they did and stuff.
Right. And sort of moping about it.
Yeah.
Or you know.
Being
And
Polish
again,
about it.
I still believe that there are a few chunks of the arguments that were not
Yes.
said that
Well,
are missing.
also it's so there's very little talking. Most of the communication is stuff that you need to come to with special knowledge of the era, of the culture. I mean, but underneath it, the story I think still holds together.
I think it's a great movie, but
Let's
I
look
do,
at
but
the-
I do.
let's look at the signpost.
I do feel like
That's what I was
it
gonna
needed
say.
another 10 or 15 minutes in that final act.
The thing that I really like
You
about
know?
Signpost.
Oh yeah,
main
here's the one
character.
that you were waiting for.
Yeah.
Yes, the playing the role
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's
as,
right.
as signpost 4.
And also Signpost 3, which is
Changing
she's
one's nature.
refusing to change her nature.
Right.
You know, those are the two that I
Well,
was
to me, that was that her becoming her aunt was changing her nature, but I think that was transitioning. Changing one that's
You know,
she
wasn't-
see that's a diagonal.
Yeah. It's
So that's so it felt like it was a journey from changing one's nature to playing a role. I think that kind of merged together. But I saw
Right.
I saw
well, you see, this is one that's an X pattern. So you feel the first half, and then you feel the second half.
Mhm.
Right.
So there's a big switch in the middle where she goes from being, the beer to the doer, sort of, but not really, playing with it, but not really.
Right.
I think that's where you have that. Is she a doer or beer? Well, ultimately, yes, she still wants to be a beer, but she flirts with it, starting at the end of the changing one's nature and all through the playing a role. I think the changing one's nature, think of that as growing up. Because that third act is when she grows up, when she goes from being, it's like, okay, I'm no longer an ignorant child. I'm flirting a little bit, and I'm flirting with not taking the church. And I realize I'm not ready for it yet. And that's really the becoming part, is when she basically goes, maybe I'm not the person I thought I was. I've grown up a bit. So now let me put on my aunt's heels and test drive her life, since she's no longer there. And it's like,
it's
nope.
Yeah,
This doesn't work for me.
So
and it ends on the point of playing a role, or in that she chose the lifestyle. She chose the going back to the nun lifestyle to be that,
Right.
the being.
right.
Now that's where she ends up, because she made that lifestyle choice.
So it's interesting. If you choose changing one's nature and playing a role and obtaining, right? And then you can leave most of the other choices that we were bickering over totally undone, and
Right.
you're left with,
Okay.
if you just you guys have to pick one issue, and the rest of it falls into place.
Right.
No, sweet.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah,
It also forces success.
I've done one analysis like that where we only had to pick 5 choices. And I had at that point never done one where it was a real analysis and only had 5 choices to make. It's like, holy crap!
Yeah, well,
But it picked ones that we had already chosen. We had already picked, this is the act order. We knew the act order because we had really interesting information on the flow of the influence character through line. And we picked a couple things and the whole story form just popped out. And all the things that we had talked about and agreed on but didn't actually put in the story form, they were all there. It was that was the freakiest one I've ever done.
oh, I've mapped it out to where you can, depending on the story form, because some, like if you pick female mental sex, like good and bad don't get selected. That's just kind of arbitrary. It's just kind of left on its own.
Right.
But if you have a male mental sex, good and bad is connected to something. But
it has to
you
do
get,
with time lock and option lock, which are
no, not directly.
Action and decision. Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the one.
So,
that's
but-
the one
but
that females
there-
go to.
Years ago, I mapped out where you could choose a story from 4 or 5 things without even touching the signposts.
What were the choices? What was the story form you wanted to do?
It was different. Now, I think it probably won't hold up to against that. It was that was going back to the OS and activity, which would have been really underfleshed and not done properly.
Oh,
So
okay.
I don't think.
Were you in gathering information?
Yeah.
Were you learning present?
And
Yeah.
she was contemplating fixed attitudes. She was appraisal versus reappraisal. So whether I want to be a non or not. And then
Conceiving.
her mom.
But we don't see any of that. That's the thing is we don't ever see whether or not. I mean, I know that movie you're talking about.
Yeah.
But we don't actually see that.
Yeah.
It really isn't so much about whether I want to be a nun or not. It's what's all this new stuff and what does it have to do with me and so it is a different story.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's a pretty. I say this every time, but I think it's a pretty good story form. All right. Well, that one took a lot longer than we've been taking. I guess it's a long film, but not much dialogue to have.
enough.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think we hammered it out, despite it being a outcome success story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know. Well, it doesn't
Whatever.
feel like a bittersweet ending.
Especially it does feel like
especially with the ant
It feels like better
knocking off
still,
2/3 of the way through the story.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, oh well, she leaves.
It
She
doesn't
goes,
feel, you even say it doesn't feel like a triumph.
well, no, I
story
don't
form
think it
says
feels
it's
like
true.
it. It doesn't. It feels like everything is wrapped up at the end. Like, it doesn't feel like there's,
Yeah, but it's a grayscale.
But I don't
it's
think-
a colored.
Yeah, I think this is one of those ones where success is hovering at the threshold line,
Right.
and costs are like really high
Fair enough.
because
It's
it
only 80
didn't,
minutes.
huh?
It's
Yeah,
only
it's
80
only
minutes. What are you gonna do?
And it's very minimalistic, and it
And
does.
had they moved the ant's suicide to the end, it would have been a different story. It would have balanced completely different.
Or if they had handed the argument, the impact character argument off to the sax player and played that out.
Yeah, all he did was he just acted as that, like in Star Wars, that voice, the trust the Force, that kind of thing, where she was doing a little test and
But it was kind of like that
very
segment.
weak.
I mean that segment was very Last Temptation of Christ kind of thing, where it's like, okay, the story this part of the story is basically done, but now there's this extra coda where you have to kind of choose whether you're going to be a saint or an earthly person. Well, or yeah. Are you going to be the Messiah, or are you just going to be a regular person?
Or just a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go.
Okay. Well, next month we're doing, I believe it's Moonstruck.
Yeah.
So that should be light.
I'll get over it.
That's cool.
Although I will tell
What?
you that we
Yeah,
had no
space
trouble
agent.
identifying the main and influence character in this.
That's a really cool.
All 4 through lines were pretty clear. Of course, there was hardly anybody else in the movie, but I think we can probably nail in Moonstruck who the main influence characters are as well. But we'll see. All right.
Excellent.
Well, that's it for tonight.